Hello and welcome to today's episode of Mitten Backstage with the wonderful Michael Dause. So a lot of you might know Michael Dause from the Michigan trio The Accidentals, but he is also a prolific songwriter and multi-instrumentalist in his own project called Treeskin. If you liked the conversation we had today and you want to support podcasts like this one, you can head on over to patreon.com/Dr. Snedeker. There, you can contribute at different levels to get access to podcast episodes in audio and video format early. You'll get access to behind-the-scenes live streams, as well as different exclusive merch and the ability to hire me as an instructor, consultant, and recording artist. So thanks again for tuning in. Feel free to share this with your friends and give me a follow or subscribe on the platform you might be listening this on or watching this on YouTube. And let's get right into the conversation with Michael Dause.
And I needed to. When I kind of came off from doing all the live streams with the band for the first month in October, I think I took like 2 weeks and just slept. So now I'm like back into gear of like, all right, it's time to work on more projects and do more things.
Yeah.
But man, I'll tell you what, like playing Halo though, I never had an Xbox growing up, so my like memories of Halo are only from like going over to my friend's house. You know?
Yep.
Like I was that kid who was like, well, I got to go over to, Mark's house because he's got Halo and I don't have it yet. And all that stuff, like elementary school and middle school, man, like bringing back memories.
Yeah. Like I remember even in high school, I had a friend who we'd go to his house and like to just set up to do like a LAN party or like play, just couch co-op on like his older Xbox. Like we just put so many hours into just doing multiplayer and
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
It's nice. But yeah, thanks for coming on this podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for asking me to do it. I was totally down after our last convo. we were like both trying to hang up, but we were like, oh wait, you got to check out this like live session on YouTube and
hold
like
on.
all that stuff. So yeah, I'm glad we've gotten the chance to chat again.
Yeah, and I kind of keep we basically did the intro is just like kind of just start chatting and I faded in. But yeah, so you've been, I see all of the toys in your studio. How was that just kind of like, bringing in a bunch of stuff and putting it wherever, or did you like slowly transform the space over the last year? Or?
Oh yeah. Well, and I've only really been in Grand Rapids now since about October. I moved in August, but that was kind of just like a weekend thing to get everything in its space. But the space down here, like I'm in the basement, and it's starting to come together. There's a bunch more stuff to do in the space, but it's starting to become a little bit cozier. And a little bit more like, like now that everything's kind of in a space, I'm starting to get a workflow, and getting all of that together. But like this was all just concrete down here. Like I brought in some rugs. I did one day where I just like mopped the whole basement because like, and like, I don't know if you can see above, there's like rafters and things. Yeah. And I felt like Luigi from Luigi's Mansion. Like I had like a hand vac and I was just like getting all of the cobwebs and things out from in the rafters down here, and it was like, oh my gosh, I was so scared the whole time. Like I just felt like spiders were gonna like pounce on me the whole time cleaning. But yeah, it's coming together. It's been quite a feat, but I think we're like, it's a good space. It's feeling good. I'm enjoying being down here a bit more and just making it feel cozier and. Yeah, getting used to Grand Rapids life as well.
Nice. Yeah, it's probably interesting moving to like a city and then during, COVID, it's like, okay, I can't really like do anything like for a long period of time or at all, but
Oh yeah.
I'm sure you found like some spots or things you like already about the city.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it is funny though because I literally haven't, like gone to a brewery or any, like the thing that you would
Right.
just normally do when you like come to Grand Rapids or something. So, and just from touring around and I've spent a good amount of time in Grand Rapids. I remember like back in high school, I was one of the state honors choir kids.
Oh
Like I did
yeah.
all the choir stuff, and every year the MSVMA big thing would be here in Grand Rapids. So even throughout high school, I spent a lot of time here, and I love the city. I just haven't, had a chance to like hang out in the city yet because everything's been closed down. But hoping for a good summer, potentially, and yeah, just looking forward to when it opens up. I was able to do in November. John Ball Zoo had this like light show walkthrough thing that they were doing as like a social distance event, which was
That's
really
cool.
cool. It was just like a bunch of like cool light like placement art pieces just around the zoo, and you could just walk outside and see everything. So I have been to the zoo, but that's about as much that's about as much exploring as I've been able to do so far out here. But yeah, it's nice, settling in pretty good.
Yeah, and even like, because I grew up in the city, and I always feel like every year there's some added element or like some dynamic is changing in a certain like area or like downtown. And one thing that I'm excited for is this place called GR Noir that's going to be opening up um, hopefully soon, because they wanted to open up in November, and that's when things were kind of starting to shut back down again,
Mhm.
or limit to takeout. But they're a wine and jazz bar, and they want, they're right next to Rockwell's Republic, so it's kind of like,
Oh, okay.
another spot that's cocktails and jazz, but wine and jazz, and they want to like, really emphasize having all different kinds of jazz, not just be like, oh, it's this band plays every Monday and Tuesday, and like just have a rigid schedule. They want to, that they were talking with people in the area. I went there the other day with Madison and the talent buyer. I don't know if have you met Kevin Jones yet?
I don't know. The name rings a bell. It's definitely possible. But yeah.
Yeah, he's a percussionist that he teaches at courses at like Western, like a- African diaspora style, like teaching about that kind of percussion language. But he also, has a extensive background touring with like, I think he did like, was it 6 years with Whitney Houston back in the day, like.
Oh, nice.
And he's just he's got like a wealth of knowledge, and he's just like a very uh kind person, and very like open to like all these different styles. Like obviously he's gonna want to book like like, oh, my friends who've been like, they deserve a slot, and then like, oh, but these young guys, man, they're doing something cool, like, oh, these guys from like, he's very like looking all around at like, we got the jazz cafe, a Dirty Dog Jazz Cafe in Detroit, and like
Mhm.
Baker's Keyboard Lounge, and then the Blue Llama in Lansing. Like the there's an effort by the owner and Kevin to kind of take stuff from the east side of the state and from Chicago, and have them both see Grand Rapids as like a good middle point
Yeah,
for.
like completing the circuit.
Yeah, because it's like, I get an exclusivity clause, but like, I'm interested to see like when things do start opening up,
Hmm.
you know what what people are going to be like, you know what? I just want to like actually spend some time in my city. I feel like I haven't seen it in a while. Or like if people are going to be like, no, I'm going to drive across the country to see a thing because I haven't been able to do that. So,
Well, and I say, why not both?
yeah, why not do all of it? Follow your favorite musician all around the country.
Yeah, I saw you posting about the new jazz place in Grand Rapids coming up the other day. It looked super interesting. Like that's the kind of place that I would love to go hang out. Like just the thought of a jazz bar right now to me is like mind blowing. Like I could just go to a place, drink wine, and like watch some fantastic jazz. Like yeah, sign me up right now.
Yeah, it's such, and you know they're really trying to like, they made use of the space, you know, because it's in, that whole building is brand new, next to Rockwell's. It used to just be an empty lot, and
Oh really?
well, it used to be a different building, and then that building started like literally leaning into Rockwell's, so they
Yikes.
tore down that building, and yeah, now it's GR Noir plus places to live, and
Oh cool.
yeah, the vibe's pretty like, you know, I can easily see like, you know, coming in when it's like just starting to get dark, and like, you know, it's very warm lighting, warm environment, and just grab some wine and hear people. So
Oh man.
yeah, but yeah, it is weird. Like I think of like, you know, all the usual things I would try and do with like, you know, like a Blue Water King's wedding, or like, you know, like, oh, I'll go up early and go to the beach, or I'll go do this and do that. Like a lot of it was just kind of like just keeping an eye on like, okay, what's what's happening? Is everyone cool up here, or like is it all going crazy? Like,
Oh man, I feel it. I feel it big time.
oh yeah,
Oh man.
yeah. But so you've been mainly just recording. I mean, you mentioned that you've been recording for other people, but is it, well, I guess you mentioned you've been recording for other people, you've been working with the Accidentals, you know, you guys have been just churning out things all this past year in the absence of being able to travel.
Oh yeah.
What was, I mean, that's probably a very, like I could see that decision being like, you know, kind of second nature for a trio to just kind of all get on the same page, but it must have been a process to get to a point of like, all right, we got it figured out and we're doing stuff.
Oh yeah. Well, and when we like came off the road in March, it was kind of like, okay, let's like figure something out. And Sav was starting to, you know, she was really beginning to dig into the live streaming thing. I don't know if you ever saw that document that she made. That was like the
Yeah.
big live streaming doc. It was like a 35-page dissertation on like all the random things that could go wrong on like all the different streaming platforms. So like
Yeah.
she powerhoused that out within the first like month or so of quarantine. And I had done some streaming on Twitch back in 2018. I kind of tried a jaunt on Twitch for a minute. And so I kind of like had a little bit of knowledge of it, of kind of like, you know, the way you have to like send your audio through a bunch of other things is like one of the hardest parts of of streaming. So the fact that like I'd already troubleshot that like years ago in a way was a good step up. But yeah, I mean, we just kind of hit the ground running at the beginning of lockdown. We all went home for just a little bit, and then when we came back together, we were doing like daily live streams, and doing a lot of co-writing as well. Sav and Katie ended up doing a lot of co-writing with a bunch of different people. But the live streams were super interesting because we did like just the short the daily breathers first, which was like little 15-minute streams every day at noon, which was good because it kind of like set us on a schedule to like, you know, get up, get started for the day, like, you know, have some gratitude as we're beginning the day, and then like move on to starting to record later in the day, which we ended up finishing our record So
Nice.
that's coming down the pipes eventually here, and working on a bunch of new music too. But yeah, we had a crazy productive summer, at least in the way of just, keeping the machine moving, and making sure that we were still, uh, trying to give our fans a kind of musical experience that they wouldn't be having that summer, and I think a lot of people too, I'm sure you felt this way, like just the festivals alone, like kind of having those not be a thing this year, I think kind of hit a lot of people hard, especially in the music scene here in Michigan, because festivals are such like a core time for all of the music people to like see each other and yeah converge into one space. Though I will say there were definitely some good substitutes. I don't Did you happen to catch the eBird Christmas show that happened this December?
Yeah, I saw promos for it, and just seeing it, I had one of the first streams I actually did. You know, I think it was the week, the Wednesday, like right after things were starting to look like it was going to shut down.
Hmm.
I went with Mark Lavengood and Lauren Kranz, and we went over to um, that space and did a stream, and I was like, wow, like there's already such a nice setup, and like that's crazy.
Oh yeah. But man, that live stream was really nice. Like they put it all together. Like I was just amazed at how many people were on that show. Like just because it was virtual, like so many people were able to make videos and send them in, and then they put them all together. And Aaron getting all the live band together, like I like just started crying at one point because I was just like, this is so, like, they didn't have to do this, but they did all the work this year to continue to make it a thing. And like, oh man, that was such a nice moment this winter of just kind of like, even though we weren't all there physically, like to see all of the musicians that I've come to know over the last few years just like all in one space virtually, playing, sending that energy out. Like that was so nice to see this year, in lieu of being able to give everybody hugs and see everybody.
Yeah, I think that was definitely a good motivator over this past year, was just like seeing people, like, you know not only just figuring it out and like trying things and seeing what sticks, and sticking with certain ideas, and really just trying to navigate the changing landscape, but just to see, like, like with Earth Radio, getting to play once a month at Rake Beer Project was awesome, because Justin Avdek's brother-in-law ran a yoga class during that same day before the concert. So we'd get to like go into Muskegon. It's all outdoors. Like we'd set up early, and then we'd kind of play improvised music to the yoga session, and then get a little bit of a changeover time, and then play a show for people who, you know, paid like a small ticket fee. And it was great to see the people that came out to those shows, that Rake Beer was so, right away was just like, yeah, that totally makes sense. Like, let's do something outside, since that's where everyone's playing. And it's cool to like see the people who really kind of stepped up in your corner, or stepped up in taking on a project like that eBird Christmas thing, like, or like
Oh
the
yeah.
Dogtown thing I did. I recorded some music, and they, had a streamed set showing all the people who submitted, and then like showing how it all went on a Bandcamp album for like a fundraiser thing. And it was like, yeah, we did it. We did something, and it all came
Yeah.
together. It's really cool.
Yeah, absolutely. I think just the fact that anybody was able to do anything. Like I'm amazed when anybody creates anything, because like once you've created something and you've seen like what that process looks like, you're like, "Oh my gosh, people do this." Like it like amazes me that like you can, people can just have the fortitude to like see a project from start to finish, especially, given the circumstances. So yeah, kudos to like anybody who did anything in 2020 for real.
Yeah, when I made that video of just a retrospect of the year, and it was, in my head, I'm like,
Oh yeah.
I want to, end the year on a good note. And I was just thinking like, oh, I'll reflect on what I did. And then as I'm like going through stuff, I'm like, oh, wow, I did a lot more than I thought I did. It was just all like, like clustered in different chunks of the year. And that was, it was cool to see that the little changes I made to like, okay, if I can't, play a lot of shows, like maybe I'll, do more streams and do like fundraising and do like album reviews, like just things that I knew with the equipment I had and like the space that I had access to that I could do. And, and that's, it's getting me closer to like all the people that I see that, they build these, it doesn't have to be an empire, but they build like an audience and a community around like, sometimes just like all these Pokemon card YouTubers, all they do is point like camera at the cards, camera at their face, and then everyone's just like Pikachu, Charmander, like just freaking out about like, wow. You're like, yeah, it kind of motivated me to start the Patreon finally after like, years of being like, yeah, this sounds cool, and trying live stream actually also on Twitch. But it was initially for gaming. I was just like trying it because it was built into the PS4. I could just like send it out to Twitch.
Oh yeah.
But yeah. So I'm looking forward to this year kind of being the year of like actually focusing on what it's weird because like it's you work on things with projects and groups and it's definitely like part of your growth and your goals and all that, but then there's those other things that you're like, what, I know I can do other things. Like I want to try those things, and yeah, kind of making an avenue for me to work on these skills rather than, just kind of sitting there and being like, does anyone want me to like edit something so I can learn how to edit? It's like, why don't I just make something and then learn how to edit it that way?
Oh, exactly. Well, it's funny you say that. But I do want to come back and talk about Patreon too, just because like with the Accidentals, we've done a bunch of stuff. But we'll get to that in a second. I want to say that like, making a thing just to like work on something. I've been trying to, while I've been home, I've been trying to understand the mastering process a lot better. And I've been doing a couple things for friends of just, like people letting me kind of guinea pig on their stuff and see what can happen with it. But like, I was bored one night and I was like, man, I just want to like work on mastering. It was like 1 a.m. So I ripped the audio from the Jacob Collier Tiny Desk concert that he did, that like Tiny Desk from Home, which is like one of my favorite things I've seen all year. Like that, I loved that performance. But like I ripped the audio from it and like mastered it, like remastered it again, like cut it up into songs, and now I just have like a tape on my iTunes that's like the like the whole show in its own thing. But it was one of those things where I was like, I need to get better at this. I just need to unabashedly work on it.
Right.
Just like really find ways to just, work on it in whatever moment I'm in, whether that's like just critical listening to somebody else's music or like, just taking what you have and trying to work with it in whatever way. Were you gonna say them?
Oh, I was just thinking like Jacob is a good example of like working on something to work on. So like, thinking I first found out about him when I was in like, I think it must have been like early, it was either, like 8th grade or 9th grade. And it was when he was also a teenager, and he put out that version of I Saw Three Ships, and it was like, oh, this kid's like playing multiple instruments, multiple windows. Like he's been doing that for years, and that was before anyone, even cared who he was or paid attention to him. And he was just like exploring how to be, I don't know. It's almost like he needed an outlet for how many instruments he plays.
Yeah,
I'll start my own band of me's.
I thought that was I just loved that idea. Like in that Tiny Desk video where it was just the four of him. Like that's just fun. It's just fun to watch. Like,
Yeah.
oh yeah, we're in the future. I forgot. You can just like build a band of yourself. Like fairly, like I've got iMovie. I've got like my computer camera. If I really wanted to, I could potentially do something like that just because like the stuff is available. And I love that. Like people just bending, anything that's available to them to their will to like make the stuff that they want to make.
Yeah.
I wanted to mention, like you were saying that you've really dug into the Patreon thing. That has been really cool to see, not only just with the accidentals, and we do a lot of stuff on our Patreon as well, but just like to see all of the other artists that are kind of starting to get onto the platform and build their own, like their own zone. But I think it goes to what you said, where it was like, find the things that you're already interested in doing. And, instead of being like, would somebody like it if I did this thing, and just kind of like doing it because you enjoy it. Like for our Patreon, we have a bunch of different things, but one of my favorite parts is we do an album review bi-weekly with some of our Patreon folks. And they, everybody who's in that tier of Patreon gets to like submit an album that was like really, really important to them or that they love so much, and everybody listen. It's like a book club, but like for records. And so like everybody goes and listens to it, and then we all come back and just like talk about it. And it's so funny because like everyone's so honest. So like there'll be some weeks where like, somebody will have an album that they like love, and there'll be like one or two people in the group that are like, you know what? I didn't like this record. And like here's why. But it's like an open discussion. Like it's all super friendly, and I've learned a lot about a lot of different bands just from, like the people on our Patreon are awesome teachers as well, and they've like pointed us to different albums and things that I would have never come across on my own. And so it really is kind of like a give and take of like, yes, we're like a band providing a thing for fans, but like the fans also get to like interact with you and like kind of, you insert their, favorite things into your lives as well, which is kind of cool. So I've been really enjoying that aspect of like having our band be on Patreon and whatnot. So yeah, I love seeing all the stuff that you're doing on Patreon as well. Like it looks like you've got a solid system down.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, it's definitely like, I think the first Patreons I ever checked out were for, it was around the time, I think it was 2015, or well, I guess Patreon started 2016, but in 2015, these guys from IGN, the big video game media company, they left their very stable, very, like they'd been there long enough to have a lot of creative control. They left it, and, this team of 5 people are like, all right, we're going to, produce like podcasts, and we're going to see what happens after that. And now cut to years later, they went from like shooting in a shared like apartment space to like having a studio with like a video wall, and now they're moving into an even bigger studio and they're like able to do like, more as things open up again, like they're going to be able to do bigger production type things. They were able to hire other people in their sphere, and it all started with just like them seeing that they had an audience on this kind of side venture they were doing with the podcast, and being like, oh, we could like, build something out of this. And they went from one successful Patreon to that wasn't focused on video games. It was just kind of focused on like talking about life and the topicless podcasts with just goofy people, to then everyone's like, but you were in video games, talk about video games. So they made like the video game version of the brand, and like that Patreon did well, and then they just keep expanding. And they do a lot of, they're really good at like checking in with their fans. They have some big fan event every year, in addition to like convention visits. They'll like they threw a prom one year, they threw a variety show with a bunch of like people that had been on the podcasts and like other fun people in their sphere. And at the top of the year, they kind of do a big trailer for a fundraiser push to be like, here's what we want to do this year. And then it's like, they pull in 80 grand for that month from patrons to like
Jeez.
build a new thing. Or so they've, it's cool to see like what investing in, like get, putting something out there, seeing who is interested in it, and then just reinvesting back into those people.
Totally.
Like
and making it accessible, to where like, before a thing like Patreon existed, I probably would have thought, oh, well, like, how do I just like, be a patron to a band other than just like, buying a CD or buying, their merchandise. Like, I think that it is kind of like an investment in it. Like if you want to, it's almost like a perpetual Kickstarter where it's like, if you want to see this thing exist, like, just come on board with us and hang out for a while.
Yeah.
Like understand the lay of the land here.
Yeah. And it's, the space kind of makes it, easy to get in and just like check things out, even if it's like, oh, I'll spend $5 and listen to some podcasts, see if I like it. Or and I've also offered, like, because I've been asked over the years, like, oh, do you teach, do you have a studio? And it's like, I don't really, but now I'm offering like half hour or hour consultations with the people who subscribe at that tier also get everything else. But some people are interested in that, and I have one student right now who actually George Herschel from Desmond Jones. He's the
nice
saxophone player, and he took the hour and split it up into like bi-monthly lessons. So that's been nice to, see people who like, because I didn't even think about that. Like, oh, maybe someone wants me an hour on a Tuesday. And it's like, oh, that makes way more sense. You could just split it up into 2 sessions.
Oh,
and it's been fun just kind of like making things and seeing, what other ideas I have now that I'm getting more comfortable with video. I'm starting to like, think about putting things up on YouTube and like, expanding what's possible for what things I put out that are free, and then that also attract people to like want to invest in the Patreon portion of it.
Oh yeah. Well, and speaking of creating things, I wanted to talk about the piano that you threw on the demo that I sent your way.
Oh yeah.
Because that was wonderful. I think that one of my like needs in life, because I'm not a piano player at all. Like I can kind of plunk out some things, and I've tried to learn piano like multiple times in my life, and it just has never clicked. Like I think it's the like individual finger movements that I always get stuck at. Even like weird, like as a drummer, I know that I'm like, doing all my legs and hands are moving at once, but I like don't have the dexterity to like individualize all of those. So like to just like hear you play piano over something that I like threw your way, it's like instant endorphins. Like it's everything that I wanted. It's like all the good chords, like, you know, all the good chords to just put in those places. Like and I'm sure eventually it'll come out in some way, shape, or form or fashion, so anybody listening can hear it.
Yeah.
But you know, it just it's so much fun. Like I think this time in 2020 has really like shown me the power of collaboration, like really and truly. Because like, you know, I was like, man, I was just sitting in the basement. I was like, man, I really just want some like just jazz chords over everything, like, you know. And our friend Lauren was like, send it to Dutcher. Like, why are you not, like, just do it, like, text him, he'll be down for it. And I was like, okay, you know. And just being a person who's kind of ridden that line between introvert and extrovert, sometimes I'm just nervous to reach out to people because, you know, it's social interaction, and especially in this year where I think, you know, social interaction has definitely been on like a downward trend, at least person to person.
Right.
But, you know, I'm so glad I did, because when I was listening to it yesterday, like, you just put some things exactly in the spots that I was like picturing in my mind. Because I sent you like a bass guitar and drum track, basically, you know, with like maybe a little piano thing or something in the background. But like it is so rad. Just
awesome.
The way yeah, just like the way that you were kind of like just buzzing over those chord changes. Like, chord changes are something that I can't do all too well, at least like quickly, you know. Like, jumping to chord changes is fairly difficult for me. That's why I'm kind of more into like a shoegazy indie route, because with like long held out notes, because that's
Right.
something that I, you know, feel in a good space to do. But like those kinds of chord changes are just wild. Like, I don't know, like, I guess how, when you're going into a piece, like if somebody sends you something, like, how did you get to where you got to in like making those like changes happen? Like, did you kind of have to listen to the song and like plunk out what chords were happening where? Like,
Yeah.
what's your process when it comes to like working on stuff like that? Because I feel like everybody has a way of going about it.
Yeah. So, and I feel like my process has improved over the last year with collaboration and getting the office at Third Coast and being able to jump in on random sessions. Like, I have one that's next week that I don't know what it is, and I know nobody sent me anything, but that's usually how it goes. It's usually I listen to a tune and then I kind of play along with it. Sometimes I'll listen and then play along, but this one I listened to it and I was playing along, just kind of getting a feel for like, all right, what chords are happening, what, you know, especially with like the guitar and bass notes, it left a lot of room for like, okay, I can, you know, not feel nervous about adding another thing, and really just trying to go off of instinct. Because, you know, there's so many times where like it, in my life in general, just with normal things, like you go somewhere and there's a menu and you're like, wow, what do I want? There's so many. It's like, I like all these things. Do I want, it's like, oh, I had pasta last time I came here, but it's so good. But like, I want music to not be that hang up.
Yeah.
I want to be able to just like, you know, like go with the gut reaction. And then like, so I was playing along with it and just kind of getting a feel for the sections, seeing like, okay, this, you know, the E major and minor switching, like what could I do at that space? Also thinking of how the verse is a little bit more sparse. So do I want to like, I thought about like what you know, I played with the guitar and bass thinking like, oh, do I want like this? Like, does that sound cool? But then you know, I was thinking like, oh, there's, that still leaves a lot of space. Like everything else is already doing that rhythm. So like, what could I do that's a little simple addition on top of it? And I picked that Rhodes sound because I like something about like just like a not a lo-fi warbly, but like a spacey phasery type Rhodes is always a cool, like it's like a little bit warm, it's a little bit, it's got
It's hard
space.
to beat a Rhodes sound, honestly. Like the Rhodes is just, it's like the Swiss Army knife of texture in recordings. Like you can do so much with it, and without even like changing its sound all that much. Like it just fits. I think that's why like it's such a a key instrument in like the zeitgeist of recorded music, is because it like just is that pleasing, warm, like inviting tone that you can like add to a piece of music.
Yeah, and as I grew up taking classical music, and I got my first keyboard when I was in high school, and that was the first time kind of not just hearing certain sounds, but starting to like play certain sounds and be like, oh, okay, this has a different touch or feel, or I can do these kind of colors with it. That's one reason I like, working with Third Coast, is because they have, a B3, a C3, a Grand, Baby Grand,
They've got
Rhodes,
all the
Whirly,
toys.
Farfisa, like you just throw anything and just have the option to like, they're all kind of clustered together usually. So it's easy to just like, oh, let's throw a mic on your mic's on the Leslie and put it in the ISO booth. Let's have piano mics. Let's put the Rhodes direct, like whatever, just jump around to different keys. But yeah, I liked the Rhodes also because I felt that it's a nice, like kind of dreamy color. That yeah, it just felt good playing it. It was literally the first sound I went to after listening to, because I did listen to it like, when you sent it a while ago, and then when I revisited it, I was like, oh yeah, like this Rhodes sound would be sweet.
Well, and the track kind of is like I was listening to a lot of Tame Impala when I made the first demo, so it kind of has that like, extreme compressed drums and like, just that like big punchy, kind of stomp feel to it that a lot of the Tame Impala tracks have. But it was just like drums and bass, and I think that like that Rhodes sound really like it makes anything smoothed out, because like the track is like very jaunty and like rhythmic, and so
Yep.
to like just suddenly have like a sea of smoothness on top of like the rough and rowdy rhythm section, like that's the kind of juxtaposition in music that I love to hear, is when like you have two things that like are just so like in opposition to each other, you would think, but
Yeah.
like you kind of bring them together and it creates a whole like soundscape that just works, because you have like an undercurrent going through the whole thing, to where like the piano in that case doesn't have to be the rhythmic instrument. Like it is then going to be the instrument that like either leads it or like kind of fills in all of the sonic, the rest of the sonic palette there. And so I'm elated. I'll just tell you that. Like I'm super
Awesome.
excited to continue working on the demo and see what happens with it.
Yeah, and I forget too, like with I'm trying to take, especially having the Patreon now and checking out some of Jack Conti's like talks on different subjects. His whole idea of like work to publish is it's such a simple idea of like, oh yeah, you work on something with the goal of it's going to be put out, like either a hard deadline or it's coming out, like you're going to put it out. There's no finishing it and then being like, oh, I don't know, I don't want to put it out anymore or like, oh, this is stupid. Like it makes sense in terms of like you keep putting stuff out, you're continually having to start a new thing, see how it gets to a certain point, finish it, put it out, you get better with your process and tools and stuff.
Well, and I think just putting it out too is like the most important thing, because like that is one of the major ways you kind of learn how your tools. I guess let me put it this way.
Yeah.
Before I was mixing and mastering my own stuff, I didn't know how much degradation and compression happened when a song was released to like a streaming service. And, it completely changed the way that I had to think about like how to mix tracks or like how to get the sonic balance in a track correct. But I wouldn't have known that had I not like actually put the music out. And like this year, I think I've put out more music this year than I have like ever. Not only just because I had the time to, but because I wanted to just keep moving. Like there's some tracks that I put out in November that I probably could have worked on a little bit more. I probably could have re-recorded some parts, potentially maybe done a little bit of a remix, but I wanted to get them out of there because I needed to stop thinking about them. Like there were just other things that I wanted to do. And I think that I see a lot of people and friends will like just get like trapped under the minutia of like a certain thing that annoys them in a song, and like I will always tell people like put it out, work on the next thing, like do that thing that annoyed you in this song, let it go, like make it right in the next like in the next song, because it's taken me, every time I've put out a record, it's been like 4 years between records, and it's because I will nitpick myself to death. And so like this year was kind of, one of my mission statements for this year was like just put out a bunch of music. Don't make yourself wait 4 more years to put something else out. Like just keep working through it, and eventually you'll just keep, making progress.
Yeah, I see that in artists like what's his name? Logan Kane. He's a young bass player who I met a couple years ago. I first heard him, like, he's just one of those talented, like, California killer bass players, like, plays with like Lewis Cole, Dave Binney, like all these killer dudes, and he's like 23, and he so like I had first heard he did an album with Henry Solomon, who's like a frequent collaborator of his on saxophone, Jacob Mann, who plays with Nowhere on the live tours and has his own projects. And
is he the person that's potentially in Clowncore?
No, that dude is I think it's Sam Gendel, who's another like Nowhere Sphere collaborator dude.
Yeah, Nowhere Satellite.
Yeah. Like just in the
He's in the
orbit. But yeah,
I'll show myself out.
Yeah. All right, thanks for having me.
God, I just snorted on camera. Edit this out.
Yeah, none of this happened. This is exclusive for patrons. But yeah, like so he put out this really cool album. Also featured a guitarist. Ended up, falling in love with his music. Pedro Martins. He's a Brazilian dude.
Yeah.
And so I heard his album Outside World. And then he plays in Thumpasaurus, if you know that band.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so like he was playing Forest in 2019 with Thumpasaurus, and him and what's his name, Paul Cornish, another young, super talented, went to like Monk Jazz Institute, I think, or like just credentials already, like did a record last year with or like maybe it was the tail end of 2019. He did it with it was a project Terrace Martin put together for a live show, and Kamasi Washington's on it, and like a bunch of great players. But they were both there, in the area a day early, and I was like, hey, you guys should come like play Hugo Claudin's space. He's got a cool, artist loft, like a lot of folks who just need somewhere to just kind of let loose to come and play. I talked to Hugo and we threw it together like in a week. And there's still, I think the video is still up from that whole concert, but it was just sitting there being like, whoa. And then seeing that energy go into like, 3 different releases over the last year for him. He recorded a Nanette album with, a large ensemble. He did, all of the old recordings he had under another project name. Was it Open Eyes, the Boy Phoenix? He put all of that out.
The Boy Phoenix. I love that.
And then like also put out another record with like some of his friends. Or no, it was a record, him like doing a lot of the instrumentation and production with his saxophonist friend. And I was like, oh yeah, like you should, if you're surrounded by people who can help make something come alive, like, yeah, why not just make a bunch of things and then have in your head, like, all right, I know I'm going to need keys. Let's talk to that person, and guitar. Let's talk to that person. Like, just see, yeah, what happens instead of sitting on it.
Well, because like, again, it's like the worst somebody could say is, no, I can't do that right now. Like there's not going to be like any terrible repercussions of you like asking somebody if they can do a thing. But like, I think that's super true. And, I'm so looking forward to the festivals coming back. And especially like Harvest Gathering. Like anybody who's in the music scene in Michigan knows that Harvest Gathering, like nobody goes to Harvest Gathering like to get paid. Like it's solely so everybody can hang out and see each other's bands and like talk about collaborating and then like run from stage to stage. Have you been to Harvest Gathering? Earth Radio played.
Yeah. So 2019 was like, because Earth Radio started like August. We started recording our first album August of 2017, and then we kind of had a loose year in 2018 doing some shows, working on the next record, and then 2019 was when we did, our Kickstarter. We played a few festivals, like. Well,
and was 2019 the year that we did the show at Bell's together?
Yeah, yep, the one what was it, like April or something?
Yeah.
With Lipstick Jody, and
yeah, that was a sweet show. I love that photograph of everybody just like on the back patio, like hanging out. Like that was a great show. There was just so much cool stuff, because I think that was the first time I had actually caught you guys like live in full. Because I think that we had been either at a festival or some show together before that, and I like caught like a song because I was running to something else, and I was like, oh, I want to check that out. So like to be able to play that show with you guys was so much fun, because we just got to hang and listen. Like, yeah, that's always nice.
Yeah, it was nice to just like have a show where like everybody on the lineup is like not just a like cool person, but like you could tell they put a lot of work into what they're doing, and it's like this kind of mutual, like, oh yeah, we're all working, like doing cool stuff. We all have our own focuses, and like it's just fun to like enjoy a full show without like I don't think there wasn't a point ever the whole night where I was like, because sometimes you might be tired from like a long week or like, something happens, but I felt, energized and like in it that whole night.
Oh yeah. But, so to Harvest Gathering.
Yeah.
Did you guys play in 2019? Was that a thing that happened?
Yeah, we did. We played whatever that stage is called, that's not near any of the other stages. It's like the furthest away from
Farmers Market. Was it under like a blue tent?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
So we played that stage. I also played on that stage with Mark Lavengood. And yeah, that was my first time, because it's weird. Like a lot of the experiences I had in the music scene were like in tandem with me going to school. So there was a lot of times where, like, you know, when I played with the Gravestones for a few years, and that was like basically, you know, it was me, Justin Abdeck, Justin Wieringa, and Mario, and you know, supporting Hannah, and sometimes we'd add horns, and like she would get an opportunity to play somewhere, and I would have like, you know, like, oh, we're playing this festival, like probably Harvest Gathering was one of them. But you know, when I was at Grand Valley, it was like, oh, that's when the New Music Ensemble does a set of chamber music at a festival in Detroit. Like I can't make it. And it's like all these conflicting, or like really dumb things, like, you know, projects I didn't want to have to work on, or things you know, things that were just kind of like the semantics of being in school, of like, okay, we're getting together to do a thing, even though like two people are doing all the work. But yeah, that was another weird thing about, you know, 2019 going into 2020. It was the first time, you know, I had only really tried booking, like where I'm the one sending out emails and trying to put things together. The first time was with when August, the GR band, when they first started getting going in 2017, Olivia was taking lessons with the professor I had studied with at Grand Valley, and he was now teaching at Aquinas.
Oh,
and
nice.
He was like, oh yeah, Dutcher could help you book. And I'm like, what? I've never done that. And then it turned into like, I worked for Mark Lavengood for a year. And that was kind of my first time trying to be in an office space at Third Coast. And then I, you know, with Earth Radio kind of taking more shape, after Madison joined the band, we, you know, I hit the ground as hard as I could January, February, when I was doing a musical residency in Ludington. And I basically was just living in Ludington for 2 months, where my days,
like right at the beginning of 2020.
Or 2019 and 2020. So with 2019, it was like, you know, like, okay, I have this time during the day, I can book. And then that resulted in all, you know, all these festivals. A lot of them I hadn't been to, like Harvest Gathering, Farm Block, just because of schedule conflicts and not getting to play them. You know, I got that taste of like, oh yeah, like these are why these festivals are cool and why people like it. And then 2020 started off pretty much the same way, aside from also going to NAMM for the first time. And I was
which is it's a whole thing. Oh my God. NAMM is just ridiculous.
Have you been like, I'm sure was it with the Accidentals, or was it like just through other stuff?
Yeah, I've been to NAMM twice.
Yeah.
The first time was in 2017, and it was so funny because the California drought ended while NAMM was going on. And when that happened, it was like just 3 days of monsoon pouring rain, like in California, which was like unheard of. Like, I remember deciding to walk back to our hotel one day and just got caught in like the insane downpour. Like I was soaked like to my bones. Like I was so wet. But in 2019, we went in 2019, and it was literally the week after our trailer was stolen. Like, we were on our way to NAMM when that happened. So we like hopped in a minivan and drove to California. That week is one of the most tired I've ever been in my entire life. We would, you know, because we were staying in like the Koreatown area of LA and then driving to Anaheim every day, which is its own adventure, just trying to navigate the freeways. And the only person who could drive was our sound engineer, Evan, because he was the only one older than 25 to like drive the rental vehicle.
Oh yeah.
So he was just like, he happened to, take on LA traffic for like a whole week.
Wow.
Like solo. But yeah, that was an insane year. A lot of good came from that year though. Like I signed on with Dream Cymbals that year, which I'm getting a new cymbal in. I just ordered. It's a rivet cymbal. It's my first rivet cymbal, so I'm so happy because I've been using like the chain for a while.
Oh yeah,
like chain on the cymbal. But when we were finishing recording our new record with the Accidentals, there was a song that we just needed a rivet cymbal on, and I just didn't have fun. So we ended up borrowing one from one of my drummer buddies up in Traverse City. And after that, I was like, I gotta get myself one of these. Like, it's so, especially if you're doing like recording, like those cymbals are used so much in recording land, like almost to the point where I was like, yeah, why is this not a part of my toolkit yet?
Right.
But yeah, so 2019 was the year that I hopped on with Dream Cymbals, and we've been super fortunate to like, have a ton of sponsors behind us for quite a few years now. We're repped by Shure, and Fender and Takamine as well. They've been so awesome in helping us, over the years. So it was cool to go to NAMM too, and to and be able to play a few of the like booths and things like that, like in those opportunities to really be on the floor, like, talking with all of the reps. And, because what was funny is we would get questions on like, because we've just toured so much that like our microphones, like I think there was one point where somebody wanted a microphone sent back so they could see what kind of damage we did to it. I can't remember if that was real or not, but I think it was. But yeah, it's been super cool. But yeah, NAMM, we were going to go back. I guess what would have been this year, but no longer. We are part of Takamine is doing like a virtual NAMM booth.
Cool.
Where they've gotten a bunch of artist videos. So I think Sav and Kate are part of that video talking about their guitar setups and everything. So we're like kind of still at NAMM in spirit this year. But yeah, I would love to go back to NAMM now that it's almost like South by Southwest in that way of you have to just go and observe the chaos and like be in the middle of it. Like the first year you go to either NAMM or South by Southwest, like it's tough. Like you just have to like jump right in and get the lay of the land. But then like after you've gone a couple times, like you kind of understand the flow and how everybody operates. But I'll be interested to see if it operates in a similar way after, once everybody can get back together. I sure hope so, because I would love to go back there at the next chance. I did get to go in 2019 to PASIC in Indianapolis.
Oh, nice.
That was my first time going there. As a drummer, it felt like I went home. It was just like all drums, everything. And it was like, it was like a NAMM for drums. Oh yeah. And like, well, and the funniest thing about NAMM is that they have the noise ordinance in the hall, right, where like the drums aren't supposed to be played. So like you go to Drum World at NAMM and like everyone's trying to be like really quiet, but at PASIC it was just drummers. So it was like the noisiest, like most wonderful, everybody playing everything at once type deal. It was a lot. But then again, we were all drummers. Everybody had earplugs, and they like had giant bowls of earplugs at the beginning of the floor to like grab and have with you. So like I was kind of bummed. I was going to try to go back this year as well. But yeah, shout out to Dream Cymbals for helping me get into PASIC last year, or I guess 2 years ago now. But yeah, I hope to see all those guys again soon, because they really helped us out. But yeah, NAMM. What was your experience at NAMM?
Yeah, so I went kind of with a group of people. I carpooled down with Elle and Scott and Kevin, and we went, or we carpooled to Chicago and then flew out. Is what I meant, not drove all the way to Anaheim.
I was like, where are you coming from? Seattle?
Yeah, we just drove, I did when I first went to LA for it was Ralph Alessi's he does a summer session called the School of Improvised Music, where he does workshops focused around like free jazz and using it as like a tool and not just thinking of it as like an esoteric, like you have to achieve nirvana to understand what's going on. It's like
you must achieve enlightenment to play giant steps.
Yeah, it was understanding like how you could use something that seems so fluid and disjointed as free jazz as a way to structure the ebb and flow of a tune, or like transitions, or how to I remember doing a tune, Miss Anne, by Eric Dolphy, and we arranged it to where it kept getting, the melody just started at a certain speed, there's little textures happening, and then as the melody kept getting faster and faster and faster, like the rhythm section just starts going crazier and like doing things around the melody and playing off of each other, and then it just explodes at the end into a like no solos, just like all expression. And so, but when I did that trip with Brad Fritcher and our friend Ryan Wallace, we took shifts and drove from Grand Rapids all the way out to LA.
Oh wow.
And it was like, yeah, I got a shift going into like, I think through Nevada, like coming out of Colorado, going into whatever way, yeah, ending up in Nevada, and that was like 1 to 6 a.m. just like the worst driving time.
Oh, man.
But yeah, so that group for NAMM, we flew out, and then when we got there, the Airbnb was like those 4 people, Caleb Elzinga, Eli Kahn, and this person, what's her name? Shelby Olive. She's an Ohio artist and music educator, and she does a great job with, I think it's because she is so used to like being animated and like, exciting for younger kids that she teaches. Like she's really good at TikTok and Instagram. And,
oh, nice.
But she was there, and then Joe Sturgill and Joe Sturgill and who else was there? It was we like combined into like renting 2 cars and like an Airbnb with a bunch of people. And I was there. I got a pass through Cusack Music out in Holland. They gave me an exhibitor pass, and I just had to, pay everything else, but I at least had a way into the convention. And I had a good, first time being overwhelming. I still had a good first trip. I got to work the booth a few times, especially since Mark Heisinger, the sales rep, got sick.
Oh, geez.
Like the second day, he's like, I can't. It's like I'm already hit with I'm already sick, and his in this like super loud conference, convention center. He's like, I get to the booth, which Cusack had a little space on a table as part of a larger exhibit put on by Delicious Audio.
Gotcha.
So
Okay.
like a Danish guitar accessory company and a French pedal company. And
Was that in the basement?
no, it was actually on the main floor, which was cool. So I knew I could go and like get to like, Ghost Note's playing at the Korg booth, I could run over and like, or this other person, Seymour Duncan booth, like that made it at least good. When I got done working a 3-hour stretch, I would be able to go see some things and try some things. But it was so funny with Mark's breakdown of like all these pedals. Like I had known some of them that Cusack and Mojo Hand Effects do, but this convention center is so loud. He's like explaining all the pedals on the pedal board, and it's like, okay, so this one's a distortion pedal. It's got a little bit of this one's a fuzz, and it's got a reverb pedal with a little. And make sure you turn it. And I'm like, what is happening? And then he's like, okay, I'm going to lunch. And I'm like, I'm just like quick looking at the website. Like, I think he said this one was a dry. Okay, that one says Dumble, so it's an amp stimulator pedal thing. Like, it's just.
You just had to like learn real quick. Whatever
and luckily most people were just like, they'd plug in the guitar and like try it with the headphones and like press different things and ask pretty basic questions.
Well, and like with pedals too, it's kind of like, you can tell somebody a pedal does A, B, and C, but you really just have to mess around with it and like, see if it's the tone you're looking for anyways, like, to a certain extent, at least.
Yeah. Well, and every, few people, I met some reps through it, which was cool. I met the JHS pedal guy.
Oh, nice.
Because he was going to feature a pedal I now have that was kind of like my payment. The Dream Mender that they put out, which is a cool like Memory Man clone. And it like he was going to feature it on the show. So his YouTube show. So he came over and took some pictures, but there were a couple people who would ask like, really specific, like circuitry, like things I had they're assuming I like built everything. And I'm like, I don't know anything about any of that, but
should just had like the schematics on hand.
Yeah. It's like, here, build your own. But
well, that's a good point. Like, why would you like tell them all of that like detailed information? Like, because you never know. Somebody like, I know a bunch of electrical engineers that could easily just solder a pedal together if they knew how to make it. Like, it's one of those weird things of like, things are so easy to make if you just like dig into it for like a couple hours. Like, I don't know. I've found anyway, random tangent. But yeah, man, like, I don't know. The booths at NAMM are like, I think that is a phenomenon that is like across all booths, that it almost seems like everybody working the booth like was kind of thrown into that position kind of quickly. Which yeah, and is kind of NAMM in a nutshell.
Yeah.
But like obviously people know what they're talking about and know what they're doing, but it's just everybody's like so flustered for like that whole weekend that it's like the most you can sometimes get out of a person is just like, here's my business card. Okay, here's my business card. Thanks. Talk to you later, like in a month.
Yeah.
Like I'll send you an email after all this is done.
Yeah. And to like, you want to be able to like, sit down at a booth and try something, or, ask people questions. But in that environment, like I almost felt like being on the other side of it, having to like, get people's attention. I couldn't do the kind of carnival barker type thing that, because I would trade shifts with Tom Wall, and Tom, he'll just like, hey, you like pedals? Check this. And I'm like, oh, is it that easy? Apparently it's that easy to get people to look at you.
Man, some people are built for that though.
Yeah.
Some people just have that like certain tone of voice or like presence of being to where like if they're talking, you just kind of like have to like look and listen. I don't know. Like there's a few people that I think of that like just have that stature of like, they can just command a room by like walking into it.
Yeah. Well, and that's kind of where like, another, I guess, side tangent back to thinking about Patreon, like having to think about me as more public facing with all the things that have kind of built up over the years and the people I've met and, you know, the community that I'm in. As soon as like t-shirts with my face were going out, I'm like, okay, I can't really just be in the background anymore. I can't just be like this like worker bee and like everyone else is tasting the honey, but they don't know that I made it. Like I need to just kind of be up and out in front a little bit more. And the only time I've had to do that like on a consistent basis was I did a summer as a camp counselor, and I was working with kids as young as like 8 and as old as like I was 19 at the time, having like 18-year-olds in my cabin, and just having to, you know, with the young kids, always be energy, always be like pulling, you know, like focus on me, because if you don't, like you're gonna start bickering or you're gonna start running around. Or so to get to that convention environment and be, you know, just kind of like, oh my gosh. And like the one booth next to me, they had like they were featuring like pedals, reverb pedals you could hook up to physical tanks that you could like mount onto a pedal board, and then a spinner on a tremolo pedal that had these magnets to kind of create drag and like eventually slow it to a stop. But they had like these very visual, like, oh yeah, slap this reverb tank, spin this thing, like see what it does.
It's so specific. It's like, I think that's one of the things that floored me about NAMM, especially if you were to go into the basement, like just the boutiqueness and like specificity of some of the things, like some piece of gear that does one specific job and like that specific job only. And yet like anybody who knows how to use it needs it, because it's like, oh, I've been trying to do this for years. But like to somebody who wouldn't know that would just be like, what is this like weird device that does this one thing and it's like $200? Like,
yeah,
you know, but again, it's so insane to me. Like people are constantly trying to figure out like the easiest way to do a thing. Especially in the audio world, it's insane what kinds of things are out there.
Yeah, like I just, you know, I think about, so the company next to me, I talked with a lot more because it was the rep they had, other than the two like, you know, salespeople. It was an artist, this guy Sven, who you know, great kind of jazz neo soul-y guitar player who could also kick it into rock mode and shred if he needed to. We would talk a lot just because we were there a lot of the day. And the booth on the other side of me was like a Danish company that the guy, like, I guess it was owned by a guy who used to work for TC Electronics at like the management level. And it was a device that you essentially like, I think the idea is you replace a tone knob or you add a tone knob slot on your guitar, but instead of the knob controlling your tone, it controls a MIDI expression. So you can like connect this receiver to your pedal board, like, oh, your Big Sky, like you could just roll off and on your reverb with your guitar knob. And I was like, that's so specific, but so useful for people who want to like explore, like, you know, being able to control, you know, that easily instead of just only having foot control. Or,
well, especially in like a live setting, you know, like those kinds of things, like even with guitar pedals, because I've only played out live like as a guitarist, like, you know, not a ton. And I only got to play a couple of shows with my Treeskin project early in 2020, but like just trying to manage pedals is like its own like circle of hell. Like, you know, there's so many things to take into consideration. I go back to the thing of, I don't understand how anyone does anything, but like just trying to get everything into a space that sounds good. And then like, man, like being a drummer is one thing because you kind of like set up, you're kind of in the back, like you kind of just have your setup, especially for me because I don't use like pads or anything like that, so I'm not setting up like a laptop or anything next to me. So I've kind of been lulled into that like false sense of security of like, oh yeah, so I show up to a show, I just throw my drums up, like it is what it is, and like I slap some mics on, like good to go. But then like being a guitarist and like even a lead singer, it's kind of like, oh, now I have to think about what to do with my legs, you know, too, when you're like standing up. But then like the guitar pedals thing in the middle of the show, I accidentally like bumped one of my gain knobs on like a distortion. So like I hit it the next time. Yeah, exactly. I'm like, oh shoot. Like, you know, that's about par for the course. Like, but again, like you know, going back to what we said early on in the podcast was like, you know, you're not going to get better at something until you just do it a bunch. So like those pedals that are just like for those specific like minutia of a second of a thing, like just means those people have been doing this for tens of thousands of hours to the point where they've found the one like chink in their armor where it's like they just need to fill this little hole with like something very specific, and like, you know, and somebody has invented it, which is wonderful.
Yeah, I think of like, there's a funny story of, you know, I think of specificity. I was with Caleb walking the downstairs area and the audio area, and he was looking at different booths for like clip-on mic options, and we ended up at the Audio Technica booth, and you know, he's talking to a rep about a mic, and I'm just kind of looking at like, oh, that's cool, like these different things. And then I hear someone go like, you know, someone nearby at the same booth was like, it's like, gee, I wonder if someone could help me with this turntable. And I was like, that's funny. Like who's just being that weird, like calling that out. And I turn, and it's like Hannibal Buress with like an entourage of people. And he's like, I would sure love to buy one of these turntables. And I like walked over to the sales rep, and I'm like, that's Hannibal Buress. And she's like, who? I'm like, he's like an international.
Like, help him.
Yeah, I'm like, help him. He wants to buy a turntable. He's an internationally known comedian with a.
And I can like hear his voice too, because he just has that specific delivery. I'm trying to find this turntable. Nobody's gonna help me with a turntable. I'm trying to like listen to all my music, but I can't. Like, oh, I love Hannibal Buress so much. There was a great video when JPEG Mafia put out his last record. He did a bunch of like showing the record to other artists and them like being disappointed. And one of them was him at the Wilco Loft in Chicago showing Jeff Tweedy. But then like Jeff Tweedy's friends with Hannibal Buress. So it was just like JPEG Mafia, Jeff Tweedy, and Hannibal Buress hanging in a studio, like listening to this record. And it's like the weirdest video ever. And I love it. Like the fact that that just came together. Anyway, all topics aside, there was something that we didn't talk about the last time that we talked.
Oh yes,
I've just wanted to gab about, and that is the music of Bill Wirtz.
Oh yes.
All right. So, and the fact that he's like posting again, I know you've been seeing the posts because I've been seeing that you liked them and whatnot. Just but like, I'm so excited. I know anything. I'll take anything. I'll take like Vines again. If he just wants to start making Vines again, like go for it. 7 seconds.
Yeah. He's like the amount of like, because I see, you know, like I think the most prominent person who's like, well, I can think of 3 things that in terms of like YouTube sphere that are not directly like, you know, the people who've seen the, you know, history of the world or like deep dove into his music, which apparently is millions of people, but he, or it's like 10,000 people, thousands of times, but
yeah, more likely so.
Yeah. And like because I saw he did, he played drums and I can't remember the song that was covered, but he played drums on a Scary Pockets video. And I was like, he's real in the wild. He's not just animated.
He's real in the wild. Yeah.
And then he did a long form interview on one of the earlier H3H3 podcasts. And that was like the first time I had heard him talk at length about anything.
Yeah.
And just like his process and like all, you know, the work that he puts into all of those videos. And then the other one was like him just being featured by what was it, Charles Cornell, the pianist dude. Like,
I love his stuff.
Yeah, like he did that breakdown of like, I think of like Mount St. Helens is about to blow up or something, and and like the history of the world, like some of the segments, just looking at the weird harmony stings that you just toss in. And
well, and I think what enamors me about his music is that on the surface, it feels very simple and like playful, like especially with some of the lyrics and some of the topics that he chooses to write about. Like, it doesn't really feel serious, but like the music is like, no, it's like not chill. Like the music has no chill. Like he might be singing like la da da, like some stuff like that, but then like underneath it, there's just like an entire world happening. Like he could be singing about like a duck, like, oh, that's a really nice duck, and like go through like 5 different key changes within that like 5 seconds. Like it floors me, especially as like a drummer. The dude has the pocket of a god, and I know that it's like mostly programmed drums that he uses, but I'm always enamored to see an artist take programmed drums and make them feel so alive. You know, like the music of Jay Dilla, where like all of his sampling within that is just so like, it is not perfect in any way, shape, or form, and it just like adds that layer of reality to it, even though like you can tell that this is like a Casio keyboard or something like he plunked out. It's like he just either edited it or played it in a way that just like perfectly hits the groove. And like, hands off, like I will practice drums to that stuff and like just try to understand what's going on. Like the dude really has like kind of that same level of understanding of all those different instruments as like a Jacob Collier. You know, just he's just a little more goofy and likes to have a lot more fun, I think, just with, you know, letting his imagination kind of run wild.
Well, and like do you know Ryan McMahon at all?
Yeah. Where what does he do? He
well, I met him through while I think he was still at MSU studying jazz and stuff, but I roomed with him for a year, the year that he joined the Rainbow Seekers.
Yeah, okay.
And you know, in that year, like so many videos came out in that year from Bill, and we would just like, you know, that's if he came home or if I came home and one of us was already there, like one of those songs was gonna get played, or like we're like, let's like, did you listen to that new song? Like, what does he mean by these lyrics? Like, is there a deeper meaning? Is he talking about life, or is it just really about just some like goofy nonsensical thing? Or like he makes something that like you can just kind of sit back and enjoy at its simplest, but then if you want to like peel the layers, you're like, man, the animation, like even if it's all like, you know, hand-drawn stick figure stuff with clips, it's still a ton of work. Like, especially like the very minimal animation I've started to do with like, oh, things are moving in a video, like to think how many hours he's probably spent drawing like pathways and like taking things and like, you know, checking it against the music, and like, that's crazy.
The level of editing is like, and to somebody who might not know much about editing, you know, the very small amount that I've ever done on like editing videos, it's like, take a 10-second clip of any Bill Wirtz video. There's more going on in that 10 seconds than I think I've ever edited in my life. like in any way, shape, or form. Like it just floors me how he's able to like see the through line through like all of this different stuff going on. Cause yeah, half of it is the music is fantastic and you can dig into that. But then with like the visuals, his editing, like the filters he's using, the like, you know, weird psychedelic like vibes that he's creating through all of those visuals as well. It's insane. Like it just floors me that he's like, I don't think he has an editor or like anyone helping him. I think it's just him. Like, I think he's just doing it.
He's just like meticulously crafting each video.
Yeah, which is like when he like took a break, because I mean he's still not technically back, but like I was like, yeah, dude, take a vacation. Like my God, like you put out some of the most like substance, like the depth of his stuff that he put out from like History of Japan to I Might Quit. Like all of the stuff in between there is just like the most dense editing and like musically difficult. Like I don't understand how he was even able to keep on the track that he was on, with like releasing music like what, one song a month or something. Like each video seems like it's like an album. Like just the amount of work that you would have to like put in to like get all the detail right on there. It just floors me every single time.
He's one of those dudes, like, you know, I want to see him as much as it's like, you know, he's the Bill Wirtz universe and he can make so much on his own. I would love to see like, what if Lewis Cole came and made a thing with him, or like, what if, I don't know.
What if like him and Jacob Collier did a thing together?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I don't know. Like it would be amazing to see. But he doesn't seem like the super social type of dude, which, you know, that's just his vibe. I think that he's just carving out his own path. Like, you know, eventually I would love to see if he collaborated with people, but also if he doesn't, you know, it's like his prerogative. Like what he's, you know, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Yeah.
You know?
Especially when, you know, he's built up enough YouTube credibility to like get a few million views from a video, like pretty much guaranteed, just from years of a rapport with his audience. I was wondering too, like when I saw that he had done a Scary Pockets thing, I'm like, oh, I wonder if he does like, you know, secret studio work for other clients and like just doesn't post about it.
Which he very well could be doing.
Yeah, just like, oh yeah, I jumped on bass. Oh, you know that album? Yeah, I did like a thing on it. It's fine. Like, just no.
We should cover a Bill Wirtz song. I think that'd be really fun.
I've been wanting to, like, it. I've partially been learning. You know, just. It started with the solos. I know with Lottie Dottie Deo, the keyboard solo in that, just trying to like find a tone that's similar and learn that solo for fun. But yeah, the whole songs are like, there's so many cool nuggets of things to like have fun with playing, but also just learn and add to. It's like, oh, I didn't realize I could just shift key centers for like this thing that's really cool and then just drop back into the normal key. And
like, I think his music just expounds on the idea of like, you can just do whatever you want.
Yeah.
You know, like in music, like it really is a sandbox. Like there is kind of like rules and things to keep in mind, but like, yeah, why not just modulate the chorus up for no reason? Like just do it. Like what's making you not do it?
Yeah.
Like, and like at the end of one of his songs, like one of my favorite songs of his is Slow Down.
Oh yeah.
Which just has that like insane groove. And then at the end where the beat completely switches to this like halftime backbeat thing, I literally like wrote down in one of my notebooks. I was like write something where like you just completely turn the beat around like in the middle of a song, you know, because that it's so nice to listen to, but it's even more fun to like try. Like, because it really is like, now when I'm starting to write new music, I'll kind of start with an arrangement before I even have like any of the music out. Like I was writing a song where I literally wrote out like, okay, verse, chorus, modulation, outro, and like on the outro I'm like, outro, do something drastically different than whatever you were doing in the front half, like just as my like, you know, banner of what I wanted the song to be like. And a lot of that has come from like listening to Bill's music and just like really out of the box thinking of ways to like, you know, shove ideas together in a way that like makes sense, and like the way that he can glue everything together with like really flowery like piano lines that just kind of like glide into one section or another. Like it's you know, good to study for production, for
Yep.
you know, for mixing techniques as well, just to see like, oh, he got from section A to section B because of this random like synth pad he put in there for 4 seconds that just like was the glue that connected those two sections or something. So yeah, man, if you ever have the want to to put together a Bill Wirtz cover, I'm with you on it. I'd completely be down.
I'd say I'm totally down, because that's one of my goals for this year, is to like, as much collaborating as I've done in the past year with everything. It'll be nice to like, you know, kind of take it up to the next level of like, you know, I'm not just sending things to people and they put it all together. Like what does it look like if I'm part of that process, or if I'm, you know, making the thing.
Mm-hmm.
Another dude I you know, in the interim of Bill Wirtz, this dude's kind of also, he has a, you know, a similar vein where it's like, it's goofy little, you know, bursts of like reels for ideas. This guy Juan Ariza, he's a producer, musician. Like I started following him years ago when he was still, you know, a college age at Berkeley in Boston. And he, you know, he's one of those people that pops up like, oh, he plays guitar with Phil Lassiter's funk band, and Phil Lassiter just recruits a lot of people like Mono Neon, or, you know, people who are sidemen for like Stevie Wonder or whatever. And like, but he'll also be like, you know, he was on I think a Dua Lipa song. He was like, had some producer credits this past year. So he's like, he makes his brand of pop music is like, you know, it's very much like, it's that kind of vibe where you're listening to it and you're like, okay, there's that little, whatever, that feeling of nostalgia for something that isn't what's being expressed, but in words, but with emotion or with the vibe of a tune. And you're like, I'm nostalgic for this person's life. That doesn't make sense, but I feel it. Like, that's what's happening. So it's like, you know, very warm and, you know, intimate, still with a groove. And, you know, has these little moments, little textures, little things he adds. But he, you know, he'll post these little things that are just like, you know, talking about, like in the reel, he started one that was like, well, what are you thinking about? It's 3 a.m. And then it cuts to the song and he's like, where do eels come from? Where do eels come from? Do they fall from the tree to the bottom of the sea? Where do eels come from? And just like all these like emoji, like eels just swimming around. And then he posted one the other day where I was like, oh, I've totally done that. Like, it was just a short little jam of like, he's like, I totally heard what you said, but I don't really remember it, so I'm just gonna say that's cool. I'm like, yep.
The ADHD anthem for our generation. For real.
Yeah. Oh, but he's also, has these he'll go live talking about like producing, or he'll like do an Instagram conversation with an artist he's working with, and they'll do like like a live session where he's like working with them on mixing or something. So he peppers out these little nuggets of like, oh, that's cool, I'd never thought to try that, or making videos. Like he recently got on TikTok, and some singer like did the song that Jack Black kind of outlines in School of Rock.
Yeah. Oh, I know exactly what you're talking about.
And then Juan just made this whole backing experience with it, and I'm like, I want this full song now. Like, it's so well done for like a 30-second video. But
oh man,
yeah, so many creative people.
For real. I think that like one of the things that I've been able to do while in quarantine is just really like deeply study sonics, because I've always wanted to get into the production game, and really kind of just produce people. Like I've been producing my own music for a long time, and I just love the like editing and messing with the noise and sound, and really seeing how weird you can make something that's like very simple. I think is one of the things that I'm like really trying to figure out at the moment. But I've been able to just listen to a lot of music like very deeply this year, just from being off the road and just having time to like sit and listen. And one of the artists that I've been like really digging into is Bon Iver. And Justin Vernon's production, because for a minute, I was completely enamored with his stuff, and when I was in high school, like For Emma and the self-titled, when that came out. But then when 22 A Million came out, the first time I listened to it, I didn't understand it, I didn't get it, I kind of like wrote it off, and I was like, oh, Bon Iver is like doing this thing. But in the last like year or two, that album and his newest record, as well as the couple of singles that he's put out in the last year or so, like they just keep going deeper into like this weird space of making electronic music feel super organic, or at least like combining it with all these different elements to make it feel like a very like natural, like organic matter, instead of like super electronic sounding. And some of the tunes that he's been putting out, just like I was talking to our friend Lauren,
yeah,
and she was like, I've never seen an artist just like take the thing and just keep going with it. like he just keeps going down this like hole of exploration into like what you can do with sonics. And especially this year, with him producing for like Taylor Swift and all of that happening, I was enamored with the Taylor Swift records this year. Like I couldn't get enough of it. I'm like a certified Swiftie at this point. But it really, I think that like opened my eyes to like, what you could consider pop production, or, just ways to really make a song like be felt emotionally. Like you were saying, like the way that like sometimes you don't really feel the emotion with the lyrics, you like feel the emotion with the instrumentation.
Yep.
Too, which I think like figuring out that aspect of production, of like how to really bring an emotion across production wise as well as lyrically, because like you can write a really emotional song, but if the backing track is wrong, like it's not going to come across nicely. And I think that there's a lot of detail oriented work and things that like kind of go into that like mindset when you're editing, and when you're honestly when you're just recording too, that I've just really tried to jump into. But yeah, the Bon Iver stuff, like I don't know if anybody hasn't like taken a deep dive into the newest record or 22 A Million, like those are some of the most wonderful, emotional, like natural sounding records that like exist right now, and it floors me that like he's as popular as he is with like the kind of intense like sonic palettes that he's using. But I think that also just like speaks to like the kinds of things that are super popular right now with like hyper pop, with stuff like 100 gex and like Charlie XCX and stuff where it's just like super bombastic, like everything is redlined like to the wall, like just going for it. And I think that that's like, speaking to our generation a bit of just like how much can we make it, it just kind of seems to be the vibe.
Yeah, it's so like, well, and like it's interesting too with Bon Iver, like to have uh you'd look at his discography and just kind of have this expansive palette of like trying different things out, and to have people, it's not like, oh, he hit his peak and it's just like like only a few people follow him still, like the diehards and like the nerdy people. It's like he's still, his audience for the most part is still like okay, he's putting out new stuff, let's check it out. Like I'm gonna grow with the artist rather than so many people I feel like I talk to who, for whatever time and place in their life, like I mention a certain artist or a band and they're like, oh, they haven't been good in 10 years. I'm like, have you listened to them in 10 years? Or did you stop listening to them after you graduated high school and you're just nostalgic for those songs that you blasted in high school, which is fine. Just don't say, like they sucked after that, even though they've literally been a band for 10 more years. Like that doesn't just happen.
Yeah, like, there's a reason they're still doing stuff.
There's a longevity.
Oh yeah. Well, and I think that like a couple years ago, I really started to get hungry for like new music. Like I think I kind of went through the phase of like, oh, I don't really understand what artists are doing right now. And then like kind of broke through that layer into like, I'm like just constantly searching for new music now, because like, I think being in tune with what's going on in the world and then like seeing artists in real time, like talk about it or like, make a piece about it or just want to discuss it through art or, to help people like feel through it, especially, is like something that I think a lot of people need right now, especially like given the state of the world. But like it was insane to me, like right at the beginning, or not right at the beginning of the pandemic, but I'm a stats person. Like I love looking at numbers of everything. And I was looking at Spotify of just like some of these artists that, you can tell are kind of like artists that people turn to when things like in their life maybe aren't doing so good. Like, what's your cry record? Like what's your like, oh, I'm sad today because work was terrible and I just need to like calm down and like settle in. And like suddenly those artists like Bon Iver, like Fleet Foxes, like who is somebody else I was looking at, like just these artists that make this like super like comforting and like emotional music, all of their numbers just started going up, like, because people were just like hitting the replay like, nah, I need to feel better. So
yeah. Well, and for me, 2020, I had, there were like points throughout the year where I, between making a playlist for local spins, listing a top 10 album picks with like, I think I had to narrow it down to 5, and I had like, 20 honorable mentions or something.
Yeah.
And like making these like Tuesday playlists for Earth Radio, just as like, it started out as like trying to get everyone in the band to like share their influences, but everyone has different listening habits. So it turned into just like me trying to get used to curating playlists again. Cause I used to do that for fun. Like, when I was at Grand Valley, I started a WordPress blog writing about my friends' concerts, but then I would also, I was like, okay, I'm going to do like every week I'm just gonna post a playlist with the albums I listened to that week, and then after 16 weeks you're like, oh, that's a lot of albums. A lot of music to sift through. So now it's like, okay, let's make a playlist, like pick a theme, try and go around that theme. And last year, there's so many records that were like some of them, were directly in response to the state of the world and were super cool. And then some of them were like, Tigran Hamasyan's Trio record, where you're just listening to it like, this is future music. Like, what is happening? So much it's like a blending of like East meets West, like music theory and like cool like production layering and just a vision. Same thing. Like I listened to the music and knowing that he's Armenian, it's like, oh, I can feel his, like he's had to live through all the craziness that all the Armenian people have gone through. And like that, even if it's in like, some nerdy, like geometric rhythmic idea, like that drummers are dissecting on YouTube, within that, there's still the emotion of like, oh yeah, I feel this dude is like a voice for his people. And it has part of it's like, he includes Armenian folk melodies and motifs in arrangements and stuff, but yeah, definitely like distilling all of his experiences into music. You're like, oh yeah, that's why. Like it could be a flurry of notes, but there's all these little emotional bursts that you're like, you that keeps you listening rather than just having it be an etude or a technical exercise or something.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I often think about the saying of like, people might not always remember what you say, but they'll remember how they make you feel.
Mm-hmm.
And I think with music, that's super important as well. Not to say like lyrics aren't important. They absolutely are. But I think that, I think half the battle, or at least you can achieve, that emotional response with the music itself. Clearly, I mean, classical music, there weren't lyrics for a long time. And like one of my favorite pieces is the Gymnopede suite by Eric Satie.
Is that the one that like repeats forever? Or no, that's a different one.
But it's you'd recognize it immediately.
Yeah, I'm always so bad with like, as many times as I've heard it or it's been explained, I'm like, okay, yeah, I know that.
It's like the ultimate classical sad boy tune. Like I don't know how else to describe it. It's just like the moodiest, like melancholic. Like I think millions of films have used it in like, those types of scenes if they need it. Or like I heard it in I watched The Queen's Gambit not too long ago, and there was a scene where they were trying to make it like something's wrong and she's sad, so we're gonna have her on the piano playing this Eric Satie piece. Like, and I was like, yeah, because that's exactly where it should be used. But yeah, I've really just been digging into like the emotional feel side of music. And especially for me, I'm not the strongest writer ever. I kind of know that about me. I need to work on it more. I need to just do it more and hopefully get better at it. But like so many songs, I feel like the lyrics will be written after the music for me, because like I need to understand the emotional space with my body before I can like, write something down that might make sense to it. Like there are some friends that I have that'll just like write poems and then like set music to the poem, because like they have that way of understanding the emotion through the words, and then they can like make the music that emotion. Whereas like, I'm kind of on that opposite end where I have to feel it in my bones before I can like start writing about it really. And I think that being able to kind of have the time this year to get into that feel mode has been really, it's definitely my music's been impacted
Yeah.
a lot, especially some of the new stuff I'm working on. I just started like a loose internet band project with Seth Bernard and Dan Rickabus.
Oh, nice.
So we're just kind of sending tracks around. It's like an amorphous thing right now where we're like, we don't know what it's going to be. We're just going to, throw some music around and try to collab with one another. Cause we played a show actually like a year ago today, I think.
Wow.
At the Workshop Brewing Company up in Traverse City. Just like a Seth show for a birthday party. And I was on bass. And Dan was on drums. That was like my first gig as like a bass player. I had like all my charts and everything set up. But it was so much fun. And so we've been trying to do something forever. But I think that like one of the things that we talked about when we hopped on a call together just to say like, hey, what's some ideas that we could throw around? And it was like, getting to that emotional spot where, we wanted whatever we're doing, like the intention of it to be like beauty and like comfort and like kindness and that kind of just like, like warm hug of a music project. Cause I feel like it's needed, it's needed right now, especially just in my own life and in our own lives, let alone the rest of the world. So I'm excited to see what comes of that and really kind of dig into the emotional side of production.
Yeah. Well, and, that made me think of two things, like reviewing Seth's album for my website last year.
So good.
Yeah. I like listening to it. I'm like, I think this is the vaccine. Like, like it's this album.
This is the cure. Yeah.
Yeah. Like it was just like everything was so optimistic and hopeful and like, emphasizing community and coming together and you're just like, maybe it's not so bad out there. It's like, we're all going to come together.
It had that, like that sense of hope and that sense of, like it almost and too, it's kind of like a lo-fi home recording, like Seth did it in his house during quarantine, all to 4-track. So it has that very like homey feel to it, like it just has that emotion of like, it's gonna be all right, man. Like, come on, we're gonna sing some songs. We're gonna have a good time.
Yeah, and it reminded me too of like, sometimes the path of least resistance and putting something out is the right one. Like Jacob Collier just put out an EP of like, acoustic stuff and other things, and one of the tracks was literally off his phone. Like he recorded it and was like, I can't capture that type of vibe trying to go into a studio and process it. It's like that kind of spur of the moment thing was what
I
made
feel
it cool.
Like more and more you see that kind of thing in even just popular music, like where people take like a part of a demo and just like throw it in the song, or like like the voice memo thing too. It's like a huge thing for records right now. Like like what you said, like the path of least resistance to getting it out there. Just like, first thought, best thought, go for it, and get it out there into the world. But yeah, man, Seth's record, I remember kind of, I was on a walk through the woods and I put that record on this summer, and it was just such a good vibe. Like I think that is one of my favorite records of last year, just because it really just, you can tell like it came from a space of needing to heal and needing to love and needing to laugh and needing to like have community, and I think that it really shows it. So yeah, shout out to that record for sure.
Yeah, and to speak on intention, like, you feel it throughout that album. And I made a post the other week because I realized like part of, I've always like navigated and, distilled life through like, whether it's that like that humorous cynicism of music school, or like the satirical look at like something that's happening and like, trying to make it something that is like, oh, it's this is funny, or like, oh, history repeats itself, or haha, like this is but then at the same time, you think, oh, I'm converting that constant stream of like and turning it into humor, and that's good. But I realized all it was doing was like, okay, someone on the receiving end is feeling good, but I'm still like, my conversion process is still like, oh, this is just the world. Like you just start thinking of like all the craziness, and so now it's like, okay, if I'm going to be, especially now that I'm having to create more and exist on digital spaces going forward, it's about the intention of like, being creative in a way that like, and interactive in a way that is like where I would want to be if I was just an audience person. Like, how do I create that space rather than just like, start to create in a way that feels forced or like feels disingenuous at any point, like just trying to make, these spaces to create like somewhere fun and inviting, rather than like taking that craziness and just trying to be like like it's not all gonna be me dancing or something on TikTok. It's,
well, yeah, you don't want to be disingenuous.
yeah. So
for sure.
Yeah, hearing like Seth putting out that kind of album, I was like, yeah, that's definitely par for the course of what he does like every day. So it's cool to like see people who, and I'm sure he'd be like, oh, I haven't figured everything out, but I appreciate it. And you're like, stop it, you can't be this great. It can't be so wholesome.
Well, and I think too, like, I think it speaks to Seth's process. Like, he's just a dude that, now that I've kind of worked with him a little bit here and there, it just seems like he always has a new song he's working on, or that, he just currently has a rotation of things that he's, putting through his head and pumping around. And I definitely thought about that, because I've always been like very precious with my songs, of like, oh, but I want to like finish this song before I like move on to something else or whatnot. And it's like, no, you got to have like 10 irons in the fire, just cooking, because like the best ideas will come to you when you least expect it. So if you have like 10 ideas that are just bouncing around in your head, like one might come together, one might not. But like, I know that even for my last record, like towards the end of the process, I was like, I need a couple more songs. And luckily I had like demos and stuff like from back in the day when I was like working on my record back in 2016, that just like were songs that I never finished, or like ideas that never fully came to fruition. And then just like digging back through that like pile of stuff and being like, oh my gosh, I can't believe like I let go of this chord progression or something, because now, given all of the, stuff that I've taken in since then, like new ideas have, come to be a part of my like toolkit. So now I like hear that and I'm like, oh yeah, I know immediately what I think I should do with this. Like distance from something can also be really good for the creative process, because then, in the same way that like what exactly were you worried about this time last year is like the same thing of like, what exactly didn't work 4 years ago on this song? You can't even remember. So you're just kind of like back to that like starting point again. It almost feels like, you can go any way with it, which, give yourself your, like a breadcrumb trail to follow back to your ideas. But yeah, and seeing Seth kind of work on all of these different tunes at once, like, it's really cool to kind of see that process in action. I mean, especially with Sav and Kate too, like they're always working on new stuff. And especially this year, from all of the co-writing they've been able to do, like there's just new songs coming in left and right. I'm getting sent like, hey Mike, we need you to like throw some demo drums on this song, thank you. I'm like, okay, just like whipping it up, and it's really cool just to see all of these things kicking around, with the intention of, if you write enough songs, eventually like they will form into something. Like the way will become clear once you like have enough material to work with. Which has always been my issue up until like a couple of years now where like I would only write enough songs to like fit on a record, and there would be like no room to cut anything and no room to add anything, and it was like a very constricting place to work from. And I think just like making sure that you have a bunch of ideas cooking at all times is just like, it's like creatively healthy, and it'll just help you, you know, in more ways than you could possibly think it's going to.
Yeah. It's, you know, it's the thing that I'm looking forward to with this year with Earth Radio, you know, adding 3 other collaborators with very distinct personalities and like skill sets and, you know, different voices on different instruments. Like, to have that in the arsenal is cool, because then, you know, we get more ideas, more intersections of like different styles and moods and things. But it's also tricky to, you know, we're you know, we're still so new into that space. It's like, how do we make room for everyone to share their ideas, especially when, like, you know, part of this year too is we're thinking about, like, you know, how we want to market things as we're creating and putting things out. Like, we're going in to record a single next week that we, you know, Justin wrote, I think in November, December, and me and him and Madison have been demoing it the last couple weeks. Like, how do we, you know, like, how do we create with, you know, the larger group in mind, while also figuring out how we tell people what this thing is? Because like, some people, you know, think it's like, oh, it's like a psychedelic jam band. Oh no, it's kind of like a neo soul rock group. No, it's kind of like a, and like, you know, Chad Wedevin, I think, said it. It was like if Mariah Carey was fronting King Crimson.
Oh, that's funny.
So it's like, I don't want to limit ourselves in how we express for the sake of marketing. And I also don't want to limit people's exposure to what the band does because of marketing also. Because as much as it's like, oh yeah, you know, everyone in the band can agree, like Erykah Badu or, you know, Hiatus Coyote or something, there's like a common ground there, but everyone's writing perspective comes from like a different, you know, different skill sets, different backgrounds, different like expression tools, different things. And so far what we've done is just like, if someone comes with, you know, like an outline, a framework, like enough of a song to start like adding in little bits and tweaking it, that's kind of how the songs get finished. Because if all 7 of us are trying to write in a room, it could get a little overwhelming.
Yeah, I've run into a similar thing, just super recently working with Dan and Seth, where it was like, you know, we can only send things over the internet, and writing a song, you know, I remember having the thought of like, okay, I need to leave a Seth-sized hole in this tune. And like, you know, the fact that I love his music and I have for a lot of years, so I kind of like, you know, understand the Seth thing that Seth does, because he's done it. You know, I don't know what to call it or what it is, but I remember just being like, and do the Seth thing, you know, like, and here's a hole for that. I think like understanding your collaborators too, of like, you know, and almost having like a semi-specific idea of what they could add, like to your song too. Like, it seems like y'all in Earth Radio are, you know, you've now been a band for what, 4 years, 3 years?
Yeah, I guess it's 3, how many months away from August? So like almost 3.5 years as a band.
Yeah, because like at this point, I would imagine you have some way of going like, oh, okay, if I play this type of groove, I know that, say, Justin will kind of pick up on the thing that I'm doing. You know, like nothing's going to come out of left field. In the same way that like writing music to collaborate with other people, you kind of at least at the moment, because we can't all be in the same room together, it's like, okay, I have to leave enough of a space, you know, in this zone for them to play around in and not feel like they're boxed in by any one idea. It was kind of like when I sent you the thing where it was just like drums and bass pretty much. And it was like, because, you know, that was all I was feeling. And I was like, okay, if somebody else picks this up, I want them to have as much room as possible to run over the top of this thing, you know, instead of, because I could have put in some like plinky, you know, production stuff here and there to like try to fill the space out more, but I feel like that would have inhibited any kind of, you know, baseline creative thing that you're doing. You know, like you want to give them as only what they need to like run with it instead of getting bogged down in the minutia. But yeah, like it's very interesting now collaborating with people and really trying to write like with them and have like that rapport of, you know, I'm gonna stop here because I know that they could potentially have a better idea than what I could continue to work on, and like kind of giving up that power in the session, or giving up that, like, you know, like don't hold anything too tightly or too preciously, because you know, anything could happen that like you haven't even thought of yet. And I think like finding those collaborators that just like light you up in that way as well is really nice.
Yeah, and you know, a lot of, I mean, as we've seen in recent weeks, a lot of 2020 is spilling over into 2021.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm definitely feeling that in the, you know, it's the continuation of people who, you know, took it upon themselves, you know, everyone was in different places, but like the people that were like, okay, even if it's one song, I'm going to work on you know, writing or recording or something, or even if it's just, you know, like a live stream a month or every other month or twice, like just figuring out, you know, all these little tools that, you know, not everyone's going to gravitate towards every option all the time, but to have that in your back pocket, like going into this year, is going to be great for people who, you know, like some people are, you know, as the vaccine's rolling out, are starting to feel more comfortable doing certain things, still, you know, being mindful and all that. But,
Mm-hmm.
you know, there's other people who they won't be able to do anything until there's like, you know, widespread vaccination numbers of, you know, the sickness and infection go down, like, and those people have also built, well, in some capacity, not every single person, but they've built a way to like interact with all of the people they normally would see out and about. And when they're able to come out, when everyone's able to come out and do anything, like, it's going to be so much easier to like, oh, I'm going to plop a phone on a stage and I know how to take board feed. I'm going to make my own video. Like, I don't need to, you know, I don't need a full scale production for everything, as much as we all want to be Toby Nwigwe and have a full like cinematic experience with every song. Like,
yeah, but now like the infrastructure is there,
mm-hmm.
like for a lot of artists to just like kind of more easily understand how to just do that now in the wild.
Yep. Well, and I, you know, like when I went to GR Noir to like see the space, and the owner was asking about like, oh, like what little things do we need to tweak? And, you know, the biggest thing was just like monitoring on stage, which he's, you know, as soon as I brought up like, here's some options, he bought the things, and I was like, oh, all right, committed. But there's this new mixer that Behringer put out that's kind of like, it's $250, and it's, you know, the next step up from this mixer is what I have, the XR18, the like stage box you can control with an iPad or with MIDI connected stuff. But it's an 8-channel digital mixer / interface. And I'm like, that, like, more of these things that are like, oh, I just have this one box, I can plug it into my computer, I can run lines to, you know, a very like, oh, it's a jazz trio, run lines to the board, easy to send to monitors, easy to send to a computer or a thing for streaming. Like
Yeah.
the ease of use with, because I remember like trying to do it the first time without using like, you know, a built-in like PS4 streaming thing, and it's like, oh, I have to get a capture card, and then I have to get, you know, navigate the software on my computer, and then, you know, have all these external things routing my audio, and then like to have the digital component too of like, oh, you're adding more routing options, and things could get confusing or accidentally muted. Like to have something that's like, yeah, you plug it in and you can run 8 channels of audio into a room and a stream. Like that's huge.
Oh yeah, I know. And those stage boxes are starting to become more and more like I'm seeing those more and more as things are happening, especially for like, you know, smaller rooms and things that are more like consolidated. Like you might not have the space for like a whole mixer, you
Yep.
know, if you're at like like a restaurant or like a smaller venue. So having those and just being able to pull it up on like a computer is like awesome. Like
Yeah.
that's helped out a lot.
Yeah. And even like, you know, this mic I'm using, this Elgato Wave 3 mic, it's already answered a question, or it's already answered not a, I guess it would technically be a problem with the streaming community. A lot of people wanted those Go XLR mixers that are like, you know, you have all the routing options and all the adjustability, but in this mic, like it's a USB connected mic, but it also allows you to like pull up the Wave Link software and see where your audio is being routed to, like, you know, a Zoom call or like OBS stream, and each thing comes with 2 faders, and it's like, this is what you're
Oh, that's
hearing, this is
great.
what the stream's hearing, and you can just adjust it all.
Oh man, that would be so helpful.
Yeah, and then it's also, you know, if I really wanted to, I could just bring this. It's got a headphone jack in the back. And it's like, oh, I can monitor, speak, control all, like, oh, I control the Spotify levels, control the, you know, like it's such a useful tool. But that was kind of Elgato's answer to, like, you know, like Go XLRs are like, you know, $500, $300 for the slightly cheaper version. But they're also in high demand because they, you know, everyone just scooped them up when, as soon as someone was like, you're going to be streaming a lot this year, it's like everyone bought everything.
Oh yeah. Now, I remember reading an article about, like, I think Reverb put it out, where it was like home recording gear sales went up like 400% or something, like in the first couple of months of lockdown. Like they were like running out of stock of interfaces and stuff like that. Like I remember we were trying to get an interface from Roland, which we did eventually, and they were awesome. They hooked us up with some awesome interfaces. But like right at the beginning, it was like, well, you know, like our supplies are low right now, so it might be like a little bit longer of a wait than you thought originally. Which was like just insane. Like so many people were getting their own setups. But I think that is the thing, is like, and Sav was talking about it on a panel I think she did with the Recording Academy, I think, where she was like, you know, the infrastructure's there now, like what we were saying, of like so many people, you know, set up their own like home recording setup this year, that, you know, in the future, I think that like people are streaming right now out of necessity, but I think that it opens up the ways to, like, you know, just have it done more easily or be more accessible in the future for people, like, you know, to do more streaming shows or to do more things like this, where we're doing like, you know, podcasts, or just like making it easier for people to do events online, or like especially those panels, you know, like that we were seeing. I know like South by Southwest did a bunch of stuff online as well, early on in the lockdown. So I think it'll be interesting moving forward, just to see, you know, when we do finally come out of the pandemic and things do open back up, how much, you know, will continue to just be online, you know, because the infrastructure's there, people have now built, certain shows or certain things that they're doing. And so yeah, I'll just be interested to see what the kind of like landscape of both home recording and home like access to artists and being able to talk with everybody, like what is that going to look like in a post-COVID world, because we know what it looks like right now.
Yeah.
But I'll just be interested to see what that like underlying infrastructure carries over to in the next couple of years here.
Yeah, I'm definitely, like I'm now more of, especially after last year, more of the mindset of like do the thing and it's becomes an option rather than not do the thing because like somebody was like, oh, I don't really like that thing. And then you listen to that one person and it as like, see, like I shouldn't do it because that one guy was like, he hates streams. And it's like, but you're limiting what you could do creatively. It's an option for, any like, because there's, that presents an opportunity too of like, if things come back where people can do live, but they want to do like a virtual showcase of something, they, it's so much easier to like be a part of something and not have to spend, time, money, energy to do it if it doesn't make sense at the time for a group, whether it's financially or like in people's schedules or lives, like to have the option to be like, yeah, we'll send something over, like we'll record a set, it'll turn into content later.
Yeah.
Like there's no limit to like what you can do if you have some way of navigating all the digital ups and downs. And yeah, making things easier is like, so many people are going to benefit from it, that would normally just write it off or like not even think about doing it.
It is true.
Yeah, well, I think we covered a lot.
Yeah.
However long it's been, I don't even know. Like 2.5 hours.
Got on with it.
But that just means you'll be on it again later this year, and we'll have
I would love to
talk about.
Yeah, and maybe we'll talk about our collaborations in this first one. Maybe we'll work on a few things and then pick those apart at a later date.
Yeah, well, thanks again for coming on. And we've mentioned some of the things you do and what you've been up to. What things should people check out who might be interested in what you're doing?
For me personally, I've got a solo project called Treeskin. So I put out a record earlier in 2020 that you can check out. It's everywhere up on Spotify, YouTube, treeskinmusic.bandcamp.com. If you want to look over at Bandcamp. And then with the Accidentals, we're doing a bunch of things. We've got a bunch of music coming out this year, and hopefully we can get back on the road if things are going in a good trend. We're hoping festival season goes on this year, so look for us potentially on the road at some point this year if that's a possibility. But we're going to be releasing a lot of music and doing some more things. Like we've been doing a lot of like workshops and things for schools as well. I know there's some of those on the horizon. So yeah, you can check that out at theaccidentalsmusic.com. And then, yeah, I've just got a bunch of projects working on. I'm also available for mixing if people have projects they want to send that way. So all my contact info too is just on michaeldause.com.
Awesome. And for those listening, as always, if you dig these types of conversations with people, you can go to patreon.com/Tracy Snedeker, and that's a way you can get extra episodes, access to these, the private streams, and more content that's coming out over this year. But yeah, thanks again, and I'll probably just have it slowly fade, and it'll fade, and we'll just go to another